I can't believe what just happened to me at the supermarket. It was like something straight out of a horror movie. I was just going about my shopping like any other day, picking up groceries, trying to make my way through the crowded aisles. But then, something started to feel off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but the hairs on the back of my neck started to stand up. It was like I was being watched, or followed, but every time I turned around, there was no one there. I tried to shake it off and keep moving, but then I started to notice that the other shoppers were acting strange too. They were all moving slowly, almost zombie-like, and not speaking a word. It was like they were all in some sort of trance. I started to panic. What was happening here? Was it some sort of gas leak or something? I tried to find an employee to ask for help, but they were all gone. The store was completely empty except for the shoppers, and me. I started to run towards the exit, but as I got closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The doors were blocked by a group of people wearing strange masks and robes. They were all chanting in some foreign language, and I couldn't understand a word of it. I was trapped. I had nowhere to go, and no one to turn to. I started to back away slowly, trying not to draw attention to myself, but one of them spotted me and pointed in my direction. Suddenly, they all started to move towards me, and I realized that I was in real danger. I tried to fight them off, but they were too strong. They dragged me towards the back of the store, and I could hear their chanting growing louder and more intense. I was thrown into a room, and I could see that it was some sort of makeshift altar. There were candles everywhere, and symbols painted on the walls in what looked like blood. I realized that I was in the middle of some sort of cult ceremony, and that I was their sacrifice. I tried to scream for help, but my voice was silenced by a cloth gag that they had tied around my mouth. I could feel their hands on me, pulling at my clothes, and I knew that they were preparing me for the sacrifice. I closed my eyes and prayed for a miracle, but none came. I was pushed onto the altar, and the chanting grew louder still. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses. They told me that I had been found unconscious in the supermarket, and that I had been in a coma for several days. I tried to tell them what had happened, but they didn't believe me. They said that it was all just a hallucination, brought on by stress and anxiety. But I know what I saw. I know that it was real. And every time I close my eyes, I can still hear their chanting, and feel their hands on me. I'll never be able to go back to that supermarket again. The horror that I experienced there will haunt me for the rest of my life. It started out as a normal day. I woke up early and decided to go grocery shopping before the crowds arrived. The supermarket was almost empty when I arrived, which was unusual. Normally there are at least a few early birds like me, but not this day. I walked down the aisles, picking up my usual items. As I turned the corner into the cereal aisle, I heard a strange noise. It was a faint scratching sound, coming from one of the shelves. I walked towards it, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. That's when I saw it. A small, furry creature was scratching at one of the cereal boxes. It was too big to be a mouse, but too small to be a rat. I tried to shoo it away, but it wouldn't budge. It just stared at me with beady eyes. I shrugged it off and continued my shopping. But as I walked down each aisle, I noticed something strange. The shelves were almost empty. It was as if the store had been picked clean. I looked around for a store employee, but I couldn't find anyone. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps coming from the back of the store. They sounded like they were getting closer and closer. I panicked and tried to find a place to hide, but there was nowhere to go. I heard a low growling sound, and then I saw them. 3 figures emerged from the back of the store. They were covered in fur and had sharp teeth. They looked like some sort of animal, but they were standing upright on 2 legs. I was frozen in fear as they approached me. They circled me, snarling and baring their teeth. I could feel their hot breath on my skin. I closed my eyes and prayed that it was all just a nightmare, When I opened my eyes again, they were gone. The shelves were stocked with food once more, and there were people shopping as if nothing had happened. I stumbled out of the store, shaken and confused. I went back to the supermarket a few days later to ask about what had happened. But when I asked the cashier, she looked at me like I was crazy. She had no idea what I was talking about. To this day, I still don't know what happened that day. Was it some sort of strange hallucination? Or did I really experience something supernatural? All I know is that I'll never forget that day at the supermarket. I walked into the supermarket with a sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. The fluorescent lights were flickering, casting an eerie glow over the aisles. The air was thick with the smell of stale bread and overripe produce. I told myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew that something was off. I made my way down the first aisle, grabbing a cart along the way. As I turned the corner, I nearly ran into a man dressed in all black. He was tall and slender, with a hood pulled low over his face. I couldn't see his features, but something about him made me uneasy. He moved past me without a word, disappearing into the next aisle. I shook my head, trying to dispel the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. Maybe I was just being paranoid. After all, it was a Saturday afternoon, and the store was packed with shoppers. But the more I walked, the more I realized that something was very wrong. I saw the same man in black a few more times as I made my way through the aisles. He seemed to be following me, always lurking just out of sight. I tried to ignore him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, waiting for something. I rounded a corner and nearly collided with a woman pushing a cart. She was young, with long blonde hair and a face that was twisted in fear. She opened her mouth to scream, but before she could make a sound, a hand shot out from behind her and covered her mouth. A man stepped out from behind her, a knife glinting in his hand. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes, and I knew that I was in serious trouble. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. I heard the man's footsteps behind me, getting closer and closer with each passing moment. I could feel his breath on my neck, could smell the stench of his sweat and fear. I rounded another corner and nearly crashed into a display of canned goods. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around frantically, searching for a way out. But the doors were blocked, and there was no way out. I was trapped. The man appeared around the corner, his knife glinting in the dim light. He advanced on me slowly, his eyes fixed on mine. I backed away, my hands shaking with fear. I had never been so scared in my life. Suddenly, there was a commotion from the other end of the aisle. I heard shouting, the sound of fists hitting flesh. I looked up to see the man in black fighting with another man, a security guard from the store. The guard was big and muscular, but the man in black was quick and agile. They exchanged blows, neither one gaining the upper hand. I seized my chance and darted past them, running as fast as I could towards the doors. I could hear the sound of the fight behind me, but I didn't dare turn around. I burst through the doors and into the bright sunlight, gasping for breath. It wasn't until I was safely outside that I realized how lucky I was. If it hadn't been for the security guard, I might not have made it out alive. I looked back at the supermarket, my heart pounding in my chest. It was just an ordinary store, but in that moment, it seemed like the scariest place on earth.